Always a pleasure to welcome Hockey Night in Canada's Ron MacLean to the RP Show. I think you overheard a little bit of the topics we're going to get to, Ron. First of all, welcome and Happy New Year. Are you excited with the start of the new season?
Well, let me just start with, you mentioned the 10 years in recovery, Rod, and that was touching to me because I was in Winnipeg for Scott Oakes. He honors his son, Bruce, with an incredible recovery center. It's for men. So they just the way it worked in terms of getting the financing and I guess to make the program work, you'd understand better than me. It was deemed that an all-men facility would be great. So when I was there in early September, we were breaking ground on a second recovery center in honor of his wife, Anne, but Bruce's mom, Anne, and that will be for women and children. So it's just unbelievable what Scott's done for to honor Bruce. In the gym, Jim Montgomery, head coach of the Boston Bruins, was there, and he stood up in front of the participants and he said, "Hi, Jim Montgomery, and I'm an alcoholic." "Hi, Jim." And it was just the most unbelievable exchange. He mentioned the 12-step program that he'd been through. He said, "I haven't really done a great job on 10 through 12, but he said, I'm proud I've achieved 4 and 8, which I found to be the most difficult." And I mean, you'd appreciate it. It was just and the thing that I remember way back when, Rod, was when Scott was trying to build the first recovery center, the Bruce Oak. There was kind of a backlash in neighborhoods. We don't want that kind of coming into our region. And you know who was really instrumental was Craig Heisinger, who's a pillar of the Winnipeg Jets organization, an assistant GM. And he kind of got to a lot of the citizens almost one-on-one and said, no, you don't understand. I mean, addiction comes at everybody, and you may really one day need the facility for someone you love. But more than that, it's not what you think. It's going to be, and it is. It's a little oasis in Winnipeg, and oh my God, really, really inspiring. So when I hear you mention that, what do you think of when you think of Scott Oak and all the work he's done?
Number one, I got goosebumps for you saying that, so thank you. And number two, I knew the resistance. Last I talked to Scott, it was the resistance he was getting with putting it in the community. He's like, "Rod, they don't understand." I did not know that Craig Heisinger stepped up to help with that. So bravo. That's what I think. Yeah, when you say that. So thank you for that, Rod.
And then as far as the new season, of course, really, always this will be my 41st, Rod. So I kind of look back and think about how wide-eyed and exciting everything. My first, we did a dry run broadcast with the Detroit Red Wings back in '84, and I couldn't even. It was Minnesota North Stars and Detroit Red Wings. I couldn't say either. I was so scared. But I remember eventually my sort of first moment of comfort was courtesy of Brian Sutter. I was there to do the Flames games, and we did Calgary St. Louis Blues, and Brian Sutter came, and he kept using my name, Ron, because he knew me. But that was a kind of a settling effect that he had on me. And my rookie year, Ed Whalen was the play-by-play announcer, the legendary North Battleford native. And John Davidson was the color commentator, and God love John. You know what they've been through in Columbus. So he was just a godsend to me. My first road trip, first game was to Washington, and the Flames lost the game, and I got on the bus rather pleased with myself, but the telecast seemed to go okay. And JD had to lean over and say, "Ron, when the home team loses, we don't, we try to feign that we're upset with them. We don't have giggles when we get on the bus." So lots of learning experiences that I reflect on every time we walk into a new year.
Oh, isn't that something that you think about the first when you're getting ready for the 41st? It's changed a little bit, Ron? It's changed.
Oh my God!
Since then, yeah.
But at core, I just I think about that behind the scenes. McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. First tweets that came out were the heartbreak, the silence in the room after the defeat in Game 7. And then we got a glimpse of Connor, going ballistic in Game 2 of the series after they'd outshot Florida handsomely but lost a tight Game 1. They only got 3 shots and 4 shots in the first 2 periods of Game 2, and Connor let him have it. And that's a big difference, is all these Netflix series, HBO 24/7 is the first on the hockey front. And by the way, you're headed off to Wolseley. I just want to put in a word for Wolseley, because they were a runner-up to Kraft Hockeyville, went to Sudbury. Well, actually, Elliott Lake, Ontario won it. I don't know how. Wolseley was a great bid. So I'm glad you're going to help the arena there. But Sidney Crosby, Chris Letang, Malkin, they all went up to Sudbury's where we played the Kraft Hockeyville game. And God, again, it was like a field of dreams to see these guys interacting with the kids that day. And I have to tell you, like, Crosby's Crosby. So, I mean, all eyes were on Sid. But when Letang was on the ice at the morning skate, he was electric. I mean, everything was tape to tape. Every shot was bar down or posted in. And I mean, the talent the Penguins brought, and Ottawa brought their full lineup as well. So for Elliott Lake to celebrate, I thought of Cochrane and Enderby and Woolsey were the runners-up, and they got some money from the program, but Woolsey should get it next year.
Well, the reason we're doing it is they got a little whiff of, number one, they realized how bad they need a new ice plant, and number two, a whiff of raising money. So they're like, we got to keep doing this. We need to keep the ball rolling. So that's why we're doing the banquet, and it's going to be great. But you can speak to this, I think, Ron, with the Kraft Hockeyville thing. I heard an interview with Bill Daly the other day where he said teams used to not want to do neutral site games, and now they're beating down our door to play in this Kraft Hockeyville game. What changed, do you think?
Well, I don't know, but I knowing Sid starts with Sid. He's just always been he's the guy that used to phone the late Bob Cole at the start of every season just to say hello. I mean, I remember Rod getting off a bus. We were in Prince Edward Island, and Sid. First of all, Brad Richards used to teach at the Alan Andrews Hockey Academy in the Maritimes. And Brad was an instructor when he was 14 years of age. And he said Sidney Crosby came when he was 7. And the only reason Sid wasn't an instructor is that he was 7. He said he dressed like a pro, he ate like a pro, he could play like a pro, all at 7 years of age. And he's always been, like, when we went down to Brad's golf tournament, I recall Sid was still 15 and playing in the queue. And he was on the veranda of the clubhouse as our bus with all the NHL players, Brad's friends, came from Charlottetown to Brudenell and Dunderave, 2 golf courses about 40 minutes away from Charlottetown. And as we got off the bus, there was Sid up on the veranda watching every move those players made. How did they interact with one another? How did they interact with the crowd, the caddy? Unreal how observant he was. And now he's in that give back mode. So he deserves the credit. But what it also spells out is, I've done Kraft Hockeyville a lot of times. The players are the show. And when you get the best players, it is just otherworldly. The first year we did it, Jason Spezza was in. The first year was in Truro, Nova Scotia. And the rink dimensions were, I think, 80 by 180. So it was a really tiny little rink. And behind the end boards on the one end was a cinder block wall and no give in the end board. So finally, Saku Koivu went into both dressing rooms and he said, guys, we can't hit in that end because there's no give. Guys are going to get hurt. And that we learned that's why, it couldn't be in Elliott Lake. It had to go to Sudbury. We have to kind of find a facility that's at least a little more NHL comparable to stage the game.
Well, and let me just say, Saskatchewan has never won Kraft Hockeyville. Never. But we're never going to give up. Because that
doesn't make any sense, as we know. Yeah. That's why.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I hope Saskatchewan loses this weekend. The Edmonton Elks need this one. But other than that, you so richly deserve. You so richly deserve to have a Kraft Hockeyville. I saw Braden Shen was at a really neat event in Calgary. It was the Tour Champions event, PGA Seniors Golf Tournament was held in Calgary back in August, and I was there. Stuart Skinner of the Oilers. I played in the Pro-Am with him and David Tom. Stuart hit a 250-yard 4-iron to 8 feet. Unreal how far he could hit, but you'd expect that. You see, he's a big guy. Anyway, Braden and Stuart Skinner, and we had a lot of goalies. Dustin Wolf, Corrine Schroeder is the goaltender for the New York team in the PWHL. And they had a little competition, 74-yard shot, closest to the pin, your team moves on. And the ultimate winner was Sarah Fillier was with Jake DeBrusque, and she hit 74 yards stiff 3 times in a row. She was an incredible golfer, and she's the number 1 pick in this year's draft of the PWHL. So Jake rode her coattails a little bit, but he was good too. Curtis Joseph was unreal. Almost had a hole-in-one twice. Megan Mickelson was funny. She hit a woman in the gallery. Same woman, twice. Never seen that in my career. It was a beautiful, high, towering pitching wedge. 74-yard shot, right? Yeah. But it went up into the sun, and the woman behind the green didn't see it, and it hit her, plunk, not hurt. Next time Megan comes up, she hits her again. So those were some of the highlights of the summer for sure.
That would be me in one of these. Oh, my poor gal. But speaking of not giving up, you saw I wanted to talk about expansion. Quebec City is not giving up, and I admire it. Good. I would have voted no. They're never going to get a team, but I've switched my vote to yes because they're not taking no for an answer. What are your thoughts on Quebec City hosting this week some games?
Well, it's like Edmonton. They've made magic out of what should be a small market team has been a major contributor to the revenue flow of the NHL. And they did it with their great facility, and they've done it a number of other ways. But if they can do it, Quebec City can do it, is my thinking. The feeling is now the revenues are about to grow, and finally the cap will start to rise in accordance. But yeah, I would love to see, for the sake of Ottawa and Montreal, it's always been a challenge, Rod, for, let's say, Hockey Night in Canada, to accommodate more teams. If you have Vancouver or Toronto on the air, what do you do with, that was always the problem. If you had Toronto on the air, how do you have Hamilton on at the same time? But I do remember, and you do too, the heyday of the Nordiques versus Canadians. It's good for hockey in Quebec. And, maybe we would see a reversion to where the goalies all come from Quebec instead of Finland and now Russia. But it would be great to see that. And markets like, that aren't thought of a lot. Milwaukee is one that I think of that isn't, usually thought of. And Portland, of course, would be good for Seattle. So those are, everybody's pointing to Atlanta as sort of the odds-on favorite, and a reversion to Phoenix somehow, some way. But I'd love to see Quebec and Milwaukee. Is just personal.
Okay, so please, here's my last one for you. Got to be really good friends with Bill Lindsay down here. They call him Mr. Panther, but he has some
great.
some Quebec Nordique stories. He loved his time there. Tim Hunter was a vet when Bill was a rookie, and those guys have a great association. I love that whole Quebec City thing. You must have hosted some games out of there. Tell me a story about Lake Colisée and the Quebec capital. You must have some memories of it.
Well, like the hot dogs, of course, are legend. As good as they are at the Forum, they're 3 times as good at Quebec City at Le Colisée. So my best memory is of it was a matinee game late in the regular season, and Wayne Gretzky and the LA Kings were in town. So big deal. And Wayne came in to be interviewed by me in the first intermission, and he sat down, and somehow, I don't know why I would ask him, who does he like for the cup? But he said, I like it. He said, I wish we had their defense. He said, it's kind of a no-name defense, but they're the 6th best defenseman this was 1990. And he called it. The Oilers got it done that spring. So I remember vividly, and Wayne is always a great interview, and always, Vancouver Olympics, I remember Team Canada was in trouble, and Wayne sat down with Brian Williams, and he said, no, this is the game we need. They'll be good against Russia tonight, and then they'll be on their way. And he was right. And, he had the famous rant in 2002 in Salt Lake City when Fleury got hit by Hammerlick. And so he's a prophet. There's no doubt about it when it comes to knowing the game. And that's a highlight. I remember the first game of the 93 playoffs. I predicted Scott Young would score in the overtimes. So one time I was right in 41 years. And then I remember Quebec got up 2-0. And Game 3 was at the Forum in Montreal, and Quebec scored to open it. And Roy, it was kind of a softie. And I said to my wife, Carrie, I wasn't working the game. I said to Carrie, as we were watching Habs Nords, I said, oh, poor Patrick. And poor Patrick. She didn't like Patrick because she was a Flames fan. So she hated Montreal. They'd had their run-ins in 86 and 89. And, of course, from that moment on, Roy shut the door. 10 overtime victories, Stanley Cup, and the rest is history. But I think of Reggie Lemlin from Quebec City is another. I'll close this because I'm rambling. But I remember Reggie when we did the Boston Stanley Cups in the 80s. He'd lost his French. Reggie was as French gets, but because he'd been in the U.S. for so long, he was really struggling. They had 2 francophones for RDS and La Soirée de Hockey, and that was Bork, of course, and Reggie. And Reggie became a dear friend, much like you, with Bill Lindsay. And by the way, Bill is just that whole Florida thing is. Randy Mollers from my hometown of Red Deer, and he's put in the dues. And I was so happy for Paul Maurice. You saw his little acceptance speech about how his dad's name is going on the Stanley Cup. Paul his parents are both teachers. As a result, he's a great communicator. And one time when he got knocked out of the playoffs here in Toronto in 07, Wade Dublowitz had a famous poke check save to put the Islanders into the playoffs and knock Paul Toronto Maple Leafs out, and that was the end of Paul as head coach in TO. But I went over with a knapsack and he lived like 10 doors down in Oakville here. I dropped a knapsack on his front step with 2 bottles of California wine, circle from the recovery talk. But anyway, I dropped off 2 bottles of wine and a 6-pack of beer to say thank you for all the great interviews and all the heart you put into the work that we do, Paul. Good luck in the future. And I remember thinking a knapsack on a Leafs coach's doorstep probably isn't the best thing to come home to. He probably wondered what it was, but he was so great to us, and nice to see him win.
Yeah. Well, it was a slightly different time, but that's the thing with that last interview. It was I watching? My Winnipeg friends couldn't believe what he said. The next team I want to win is the Winnipeg Jets. They were like, is he serious? And I think he was. I'm pretty sure he is.
Well, he always said that when he pictures himself as a coach, it's standing behind the bench at the Forum now the Bell Center in Montreal, playing against the Montreal Canadiens. He's Sault Ste. Marie, right? So they have a huge following in there. And the guy that won him the cup is Sam Reinhart, got the game-winning goal. Paul always maintained that the smartest guy in hockey is Ron Francis. The second smartest guy in hockey is Sam Reinhart. He always told me that. But he said, I picture myself lucky enough to be behind the bench at a game in Montreal, which he feels is the cradle of the game. And so he definitely appreciates Winnipeg. There's, as you know, a ton of Montreal support there, as there is in Saskatchewan. But yeah, he would be sincere because he's a historian. He's a teacher, and he respects greatly the fanship, but even the ownership in Winnipeg. The Chipmans and the Thompsons. But Mark Chipman's family is amazing.
Yeah, and it's a first-class outfit here in South Florida, and Paul fits right in. Ron, this has been great. Thank you for doing it. And we'll be watching. Have a great 41st season.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rod. Nice to see you.
Hockey Night in Canada's Ron MacLean spending good time with us here the eve of the 24-25 National Hockey League season.